Hey everyone, KillerCow7 here. So what do y'all think of my desktop background? Pretty awesome, right? It only took me 40 minutes to do, and I absolutely love how it came out. If I have time left when I start wrapping things up here at this video, I think I'll take a moment to show you guys how I made it. Now of course, I didn't make the fan art itself. That was actually made by someone named EndlessSummer181 over on DeviantArt.com. And you can check the link in the description there. It'll take you straight to her profile. She has some incredible fan art for you to check out. So anyway, today I have a very special video to share with you guys. Now I know it's been like forever since I last mentioned about me making this, but here it is. You guys will have the honor of seeing me demonstrate how I make my Pokemon Love Story episodes. I've been promising you folks for the longest time that I was going to get this out, and I apologize for being so late with it, because my laptop, which is an HP Pavilion G7, ended up dying on me due to my motherboard failing out, so I had to transfer all my data from its hard drive into my Dell Optiplex GX270 desktop computer, and work on the recording from there. Now, if you only want to see what it was that you requested, you can take a look at the description box and you'll see a list of different points of where I explain about a particular thing. You can just click on the first time mark you see and watch up to wherever a certain part ends. Because you know, I'm not expecting everyone to sit here and watch me show off every little thing. But if you want to, then hey, more power to you. I mean, this is going to be like a dual tutorial here, since not only am I going to be showing you guys how I make my episodes, but also how to do so using Sony Vegas Pro 10. Which is the HD professional video editing program that I've been using since Season 2, Episode 1. Before we get started here, let me mention a couple of things. I don't know everything that there is to know about this program. I'm still learning a few things myself with some of the features and whatnot. So what I'll do is, I'll only go over the things that I do know, and that way it'll make things easier for me to do this recording. Second thing is, once I get through with showing you guys the basics to using this program, I'm going to be using the project file for my Season 3 finale for the main part of this video. So this means that if you came across this video but have not finished watching the rest of my episodes yet, you'll want to take and put this on hold for a while and then come back later, unless you just don't mind spoiling yourself for what happens at the end of my story. I'm only using that file because it has nearly everything that I've ever done with Vegas Pro 10. And I'll also be using a couple of other project files too. But they're nothing more but just a few additional things that I personally wanted to show you guys. Just thought I'd give fair warning about that. Okay, now we can finally get started here. Alright, so here's what SCP-10 looks like when you first open the program. And of course it won't look exactly like this, since I've already went ahead and set up everything in order to do this recording. Here you'll notice these tabs. The first one is your project media, which will be where you can find your imported files, be it images, videos, audio, and other types of media files. You can import something in here by either going to File, Import, and then Media, or this button here beside the lightning bolt icon, which this icon here removes all unused media, as in it removes what wasn't used in the timeline from your project media. In the Media Generators tab, this will allow you to make use of things such as color gradient, credit roll, for when you want to end a video with a credit section of some kind, noise textures, solid color, which you guys will see some examples of how that's used, and of course text. While you have all these presets here and whatnot, there's actually a faster way to create text, and it's the method I use all the time, and I'll be showing that real soon. You also have a variety of transitions that you can choose, from 3D blind effects to zooming, and you'll notice that in each section that I click on, the very first one automatically animates, so you'll get an idea of what that particular transition will look like before adding it into your timeline. And obviously you can mouse over them as well to see what the others look like. Last tab here has your video effects, which can be applied to any image, video clip, or text that you have. You have options like your brightness and contrast, cookie cutter, which is one of the effects that I commonly use, glint, mirror, and even the ability to do swirls. You guys will see plenty of examples of how to make use of some of those effects when I get to them. So anyway, the first thing that I'll go over is how to create video and audio tracks. There's two ways to do this. The first way involves having to go down here to where this empty space is, and then when you right click, you'll see the options to insert both the video and audio tracks. Do that, and they'll appear in the timeline. You can also do this by dragging either an image, video, or something from the Media Generator tab to automatically create a video track. And obviously by doing the same thing with your audio files, it'll cause an audio track to be auto-created in the timeline. Of course, with any videos that you use, they'll also have the audio clip attached to them. Well, most of the time I should say, and thus those two will create the audio tracks. Now then, you see that when you have the tracks created, there's all these icons that can be found in them. All of these icons are the options that you have to choose from when you're doing edits. The only function I ever really use with the audio track is the mute button, and you'll know when it's enabled because you'll see the entire track turn into this dark gray color. The same thing can be done if you go down here and click on that same button. The only difference is that this is the master volume, so when you enable this, all audio clips are muted. You can toggle this by going to View and then clicking on Audio Bus Track. Make sure that you see the check mark beside it for enabling that. As for the video track, there are three things that you'll likely be using more commonly than the others. First one is what's known as the compositing mode, and what this does is it controls whatever you see in the preview window here. This is where it would probably be a good time for me to start making use of this pearl shipping picture that I got here. So I'm going to drag this down to the timeline. And remember when I told you guys that there's an easier way to create text? Well, this is how. You just right click, choose Insert Text Media, and there you go. You don't have to click into the Media Generators tab and then click Text to get there. You can do it right where your mouse is in the timeline itself. And I'll just go ahead and change the text here. Okay. You see how it's set up right now? I've got the video track with the text placed above the picture with both of the video tracks set to source alpha as their compositing mode. Now what if I were to take and change the position of these tracks? You do that by left click holding on the track and then drag it up. And where you see the black line marks the position that you're moving that track to. When you let it go, it'll place it there. This is what you get if you do that. You still see the image, but now you don't see the text anymore. This is why it's important that you set that option correctly, because if you don't, you end up with something like this here. However, you don't have to strictly follow this. And here's a classic example of what I mean by that. Let's take and change this picture's composite mode to lighten. Now you actually see the text again. If you like having the pictures be on top of the text, then you can do it this way. What you don't see, though, is what happens if you were to enhance that text. If I just jump into doing that right now by changing its color, like this one here. See how a part of the text has that transparent look to it? It's almost at a point where you can't see it at all, so you do still need to be careful here. But if you don't enhance that text, then you're still able to see everything. You know what? Speaking of text, why don't I go ahead and show you guys how you can edit text in this program so we can get it out of the way. Hope you guys don't mind me shifting gears here. Not to mention that this is a request that someone made, so I have to show this off. You saw from earlier when I first created that text media that I've currently got in the timeline here, a window popped up. Well, this window contains 4 main tabs that you can use for text editing. The first one here, the Edit tab, has your basic options, such as font type, size, and all that. Nothing different than what you would find if you were using Microsoft Word or WordPad. I'm going to go with the Georgia font here, and resize this to 48. Leave it as bold, but italicize it, and keep it aligned at the center. Okay, got all that set. Going into the second tab, the Placing tab, is pretty much self-explanatory. It just gives you the option to move your text around in any one spot that you choose. You just left-click hold on the box and drag it wherever you want. You can also use your drop-down menu and choose preset positions if you want to, such as bottom right, top left, etc. There's even an option to set an X and Y coordinate for a specific spot, but you likely won't be using those very much, if any. In fact, you're better off just using either the presets, or, if you click on the box, you can make use of the arrow keys for more precise placing of the text. If you ever need to quickly bring it back to the center, you can do so by right-clicking, and then click Reset. Third tab features your text properties, and this is where I was earlier when I was changing the color of the text. So you have a ton of different colors to choose from with all shades available for each one. You can also make use of the RGB, or red, green, blue, sliders here to increase or decrease the amount of a certain color in order to produce a new one. Like if I were to increase the green here, it makes the text gradually change from red to yellow. Or if I decrease the red, it'll change that yellow to green. If you also notice, while I was messing around with the RGB sliders, you saw these numbers here change. This can be very useful if you want to use a very specific shade of a certain color. So in this case, if I wanted to stick with this kind of red, then I can look here at my RGB values and see what they are. The letter A that you see here represents alpha, and that just simply controls how much of your text that you can see. Right now it's at its max value, but if I were to decrease the value to, say, 135, now you only partially see the text there. This same option can be found here with the alpha slider. Bring it more down toward the bottom, the text becomes less visible, and vice versa. You can toggle between this and the HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. So maybe I want to give my text more of a light blue hue to it. But then I decide to decrease the saturation, and perhaps increase the lightness a bit. This is how your text would look with this kind of edit. There's even an option to use the color picker, which will allow me to choose a part of an image or video clip and copy its color so the text changes to the color that was chosen. Let's say I wanted to choose that yellow stripe on Ash's vest here. By doing so, the text will change to that same yellow color. Or if I wanted to use the pink off of Dawn's scarf, again, the same thing happens. Pretty nifty little feature there if you ask me. As for the background properties here, it's not much different from what I just explained. You've got the same options, except that this time it controls the color of the background if you choose to have one in one of your images or video clips. The alpha setting is automatically set to 0, so you have to increase this if you want to see the color, and then you can go from there. So perhaps you wanted a light blue background, then you would just do this here. And you'll see that you now have that background color. Last thing here in this tab are your tracking, scaling, and leading options. Tracking controls the spacing among your characters, which you can see for yourself what happens when I go more left. Going right spreads them out. Scaling allows you to enlarge or shrink your text when you're moving this to either side. And then leading, which is only useful if you have stacked text here like what I've got, can either put together your text at the center or separate it vertically. You can double left click on the slider here to reset the options. The final tab here is where you'll find your outline, shadow, and deformation options. For the outline, you've got your feather and width sliders. Now the feather is already nearly all the way to the left, which only allows a small part of the outline to be seen. But move it all the way to the right and it disappears. Your width is what will mainly control how much of that outline you see. The more right you go with this, the more blotched the outline will look. I always set mine to 0.181 with the feather set to 0, so this is my standard setting for it. Whenever you want to change the color, you have to select your color here. And once again, those same options that you saw previously are here too. And then click off from there. The change won't take place until you do so. If I wanted to do a light purple outline, then I would have to click here and then click off. Next is the shadow option. I'll go ahead and pick a color here. Okay. Now we got a color set. The feather here is a tad different because instead of making it more blotch-like as you move right like it did with the outline option, it gradually becomes more blurred. So if you want a more solid shadow, you'll want to keep this more toward the low end. The X and Y offset simply control placement of the shadow. So if I want to have the shadow sit to the left and down a bit, then I would do it this way. There we go. So that's how you achieve a shadow effect. For the very last thing here, the deformation option is real fun to use. Enable it, and once you do, it'll instantly deform the text with the very first thing you see selected in the drop-down menu here. You can control how much deformation takes place with the amount option. You've got something like this shear horizontally, switch top, curve bottom, all these options here. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with the different video track options, the other option here is this mute option, which works differently in this case. Instead of muting the audio, it makes any images or video clips disappear, as well as the text. This can be useful if you want to be able to see your text better while editing it, if it's already placed in front of an image or video, and don't want to move your text media to another part of the timeline. You can just enable this, do whatever it is that you want to do with it, and then disable it to make the images or video clips viewable again in the preview window. Not much more to say about that. The third thing regards a fun one here called track motion, and this is what allows you to make advanced edits of creating motion for either images, videos, or text. I want to save most of the explanation for the main part of the video, and you'll definitely see why when we get there. But anyway, you've got this window here which shows your position, orientation, you know, how you want to angle your stuff, rotation, everything. You even see down here in the keyframe timeline that you can do 2D shadow and glow. Now that part is interesting to point out because this is entirely dependent on the compositing mode that's currently selected, which is Source Alpha. If I change this to 3D Source Alpha, then you'll see a new window here of 4 different views to choose from. And you can do much more with the position, orientation, and rotation as well. Like I said though, I'll explain a lot more about this part later. Next up is this. This is your event pan and crop, which allows you to do all those zoom ins and zoom outs, rotations and such that you guys see with the text during the narration parts of my episodes or with certain images. Click this and a window comes up, showing whatever it is that you're about to edit. All that you see here is your workspace. This box here actually represents the preview window, so whatever edits that you do here will reflect how it looks when you view it over here. Left click holding on any of these squares will allow you to enlarge or shrink the box, but it works backwards here. Enlarging the box will actually shrink your text, image, or video, and shrinking it will do the opposite. Same goes when you move the box in any of the 8 directions. You can also left click hold on the circle and rotate things as well. If you wanted to, you can left click hold on one of the squares, and then as you go toward the opposite side, the image, video, or text can be flipped upside down. Right clicking pulls up this menu, where you'll find options like Restore, which is essentially the way you reset your box here. Center just brings it back to the middle, like how the reset option did when I showed the text edits that you can do. Flip horizontal and vertical is a no-brainer. Now down at the bottom here is your timeline, and this has what you call keyframes. These keyframes represent points in the duration of media where you do an edit of some kind using this function. A simple zoom in can be done by choosing any point here, and then once I start dragging this inward, you'll see that a keyframe is automatically created. You can also simply add one by clicking on this button here, or remove it with this one. You can go back or forth to other keyframes with these buttons. Of course, it's just faster to use your mouse, and you can easily delete them by selecting the keyframe and then pressing delete on your keyboard. I can drag keyframes to different points in the timeline, and in this case, if I select the keyframe that I did the zoom in with, I can make the animation occur faster when it's closer to the first keyframe, or slower if further away. When you right click on the keyframe, this pops up. You have the usual cut, copy, and paste options here, a different way to delete keyframes if you want to, and then these 6 types of keyframe motion. I'll cover each one of them as best as I can. Linear is your standard one, nothing special about it, it just does a simple zoom here. Choosing fast to make the animation start out fast, and then more slowly toward the end. As for slow, it just does the opposite. Starts out slow, and gradually speeds up. Smooth allows a gradual motion to take place. This is my standard for keyframe motion. Sharp performs animation for the first half, stops, and then finishes it for the second half of the duration. For the last one, hold to make it so that the animation doesn't take place until the next keyframe occurs. See how it jumped to the zoom in and back to what it looked like originally? That's what the hold option does. I honestly don't know when you would use this, or Sharp for that matter, but it's there for you if you want to make use of it. So off to the left here, you've got your properties, similar to what you saw when I talked about track motion. You probably noticed it earlier. These values here in the position section change whenever I moved the box or zoomed in and out. You can make use of this if you like to use a specific kind of zoom for all of your text, for example. The same thing can be applied for rotation. And again, you see the values change on it accordingly. Now you've likely wondered why there isn't an orientation option here. Well, you already have that. Where you see the angle option, that is your orientation, so there's no separate section for that. Source is easy to use. A couple of good examples to use that are if I were to go up here to preset, where I can select what kind of ratio I wanted to use for the preview window from standard to widescreen. I could select something like this one here, then go here and select no in the maintain aspect ratio option, and in turn it'll stretch the image to match it. I can easily reset that by going here and selecting no to not stretch the fill frame, but it's better to just go back up here and select default. I'll just take and put these back to where they were. Okay. Last thing is workspace, which to be honest, it's a lot better to just use a mouse, preferably one that has the mouse wheel on it. All that this will do is just change how your workspace looks, but the mouse is much faster and more efficient at clicking on these options. You just zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, and left click hold to move your workspace around. You also see these tool options to the left here. I can toggle on or off to show the properties, and switch between either the normal tool, which is what I'm using now, and the zoom tool. Left click to zoom in, right click to zoom out. These last three icons here are real special. You have the lock aspect ratio, size about center, and move freely X or Y. This is the norm for all of them. When you disable the first one, you can do all kinds of crops, zooms, and whatnot, since the preview box is no longer restricted to the original ratio of the media that you're working on, hence the name of this option. If you wanted to lock it a certain way, then once you've done whatever edit that you wanted to do, you can re-enable this so that the size of this box doesn't change. See that? It will no longer change until this is disabled again. With the size about center option, it would normally let you zoom in or out to and from the center, but with it disabled, you can zoom in to either a corner or a side of the media that's currently selected. With both disabled, this gives you an absolute ton of freedom for whatever you want to do. There are numerous ways to do edits from here. You can do something like this. Or something like this here. Any kind of cropping, zooming, or the combination of the two is possible. This third option here is useful if you want to move your preview box in only one particular plane. Right now I can move it wherever I want, but if I click once on this, it'll change it to move in X only, which means that I can only go left or right. Do it again, and you can only move up and down. Very simple. To wrap up introductions with this program here, I'll go over the basic audio edits. One of those involves looping, which is done by going up here. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but do you see what looks like a little yellow triangle here? That's your loop region marker, which determines what part of your timeline is looped. When this gets dragged, two of these markers appear, one for the beginning and the other for the end. You just left click hold on one of them and drag it. So now I've got this whole audio clip selected. All that you have to do from here is go down to your player controls and select this icon. The moment you see that dark blue line appear, that means that now when you click the play button, only this part of the timeline gets looped, like so. Then to undo that, just click on that loop icon again, and it makes the dark blue line disappear. Another simple set of edits that you can do is by right clicking on this and then click Properties. There are 5 switches here that you can enable or disable. We already know what mute does. Lock makes it so that if you plan to move other media around the audio clip, then you can lock it to where it doesn't accidentally get moved or even delete it somehow, as I'll show you guys right now. See there? I tried to delete it, but it won't let me. Loop works differently here, and I say this because when I take and drag this out, you see how the waveform keeps repeating? That's the loop effect. Without it, this happens. Just a flat line remains with no sound whatsoever. Invert phase is good to use if you have 2 audio clips placed in a way that they cancel each other's phases out. By choosing invert phase in one of those clips, it'll auto-correct the sound for you to the desired effect. I don't have anything on here right now to show a perfect example of that, but that is what that switch can do for you. For normalize, all that this will do is make it so that the sound is maximized without being too loud. So if I do that right now with this audio clip, now you see the difference on the clip itself, and you'll also hear the difference too. Very last thing involves stretching audio clips to change their tempo and or pitch. If you hold down the control button and then left click hold onto the edge of the audio clip, you can increase and decrease the tempo, which will result in either slower or faster sound. Before you do this though, you always have to make sure to delete it from the timeline and then put it back so that the changes can take effect. Once that's done, then when you stretch it out, it plays like this. Go the opposite and it plays super fast. Now to remove that pitch preserve, you go up here to Options and then Preferences. Then under the Editing tab, uncheck this here, Preserve Pitch when stretching audio events. Apply. OK. Remove the clip again and put it back. Now when you stretch it, alrighty, that finishes the introductions for this program. So with all this said, let's move to the fun part. Okay guys, here it is, the Season 3 finale project file. Just take a look at it. Yeah, that is 2.5 months worth of work that you're seeing here. Now Now I've spent around 6 hours in each day that I've worked on this particular episode. Some days it was 8 or 9, other times it'll only be about 3 or 4, and that's only because either I had to go to work or something else came up, but generally it was 6 hours, and even then I would only get done with like 2 or 3 parts of the whole video, and there's one section that took me like a whole 4 days to do, and I'll let you guys know what part that is when I get to it. Likely you've noticed that some of these tracks here are different in appearance. That's because of this button here. You can minimize or maximize your tracks. And in this case, when you have multiple tracks in your timeline, being able to minimize them helps a lot. It makes it a lot easier on your eyes to see what it is that you're working on. I'm not sure why we'd ever want them to be this huge. I mean, look at this. Oh my god, that is just ridiculous. I can't think of any time where you would need it to be this large. Anyway, the first thing I suppose I'll start out with is my intro and credits section. Starting with the sparkle effects. Which is good because this will cover 2 requests at once if I do it this way. These sparkle effects, believe it or not, are actually not a part of Sony Vegas Pro 10, but rather they're actually video clips that I downloaded from YouTube. I'll take and go into my browser here and pull it up for you. You can see in the search box that I typed in Sony Vegas Pro Sparkles, and you'll get plenty of results by searching it this way. This video in particular is where I got most of mine from. Let's go into it and check it out. I'm going to start the video here and show just a few of them. There's the double heart, which is the very first sparkle that I used. Then you got this one, which you guys see near the end of most of my Season 3 episodes. You got one here. And I've used this one before. And this one. So yeah, those are some good ones that you can use with the program. And this person was nice enough to provide download links in the description box here, which will take you to the MediaFire website. So you just choose one, visit that link, download it, and then you'll have it. Moving back to this, I can go ahead and get started here. So I've already took the liberty of importing both the sparkle effect that I named this episode way over here at the very end. This I've already taken to save some time because I know besides the sparkle that I'm about to show you guys, I'm not going to have much time to go over every single sparkle I use here. The request was, how do you take and utilize that sparkle? And that's what I'm going to be showing you guys here. And of course I've already did the zoom in effect for both things of text here. And you guys already know how. You just go to event padding crop, select the part of the keyframe timeline that you want to do your zoom in on, and then it'll automatically create that other keyframe. Now what you want to do next is take and find the sparkle that you imported, which is right there. Right, drag this to the timeline. Now when I take and drag this down here, you're gonna notice that there's an audio clip. Now not all of the sparkle effects that I use had the audio clip attached to them, but some of them will. And what you can do to get rid of it is you can take and do one of the following. You can either right click, then go to group and remove from, and this will take and separate both the audio and the video clip. That way if you wanted to move just one part of that clip, you can do so. In this case I can just take and simply press delete on my keyboard or right click and click delete, and it'll disappear. And of course, if you always want to do it the much faster way, you can just come over here, right click, and then click delete track, and it'll take it away as well. Alright, just go ahead and get rid of this because we're not going to need it no more. Alright, then you want to come over here to your video track, and in the composite mode, you're going to want to set this to screen. This is what's going to allow that sparkle effect to show up properly in the preview window. So whenever you get ready to start working on this, you need to make sure that this is enabled. Alright, just need to go up here and change the quality. Which, by the way, this drop-down menu controls the quality of what things look like in the preview window. And you have 4 types. You got draft, which is the lowest, then preview, then good, and then best. And each one of these sections here, you'll notice that you got 4 others. Everything from auto to quarter. Full is always going to give you like the best of each section. And when you're doing best full, it'll actually give your media an HD-like look to it, unless it's naturally in low quality. And then draft is usually like very pixely looking stuff. Now I have to set mine to preview quarter because it's a quarter program's taking up a lot of memory. Alright, so I'm going to create the loop region markers here. Enable the loop. Okay, so when I play this back, you'll notice that the sparkle effect stays more inside the text here. Well, this needs to take and be changed. One of the easiest ways for me to determine how to edit this is when the animation gets to this part here. You see this? I want to take and move that more to the top. And that way, it'll envelop this text. So what I need to do is open up the event pantocrop, find where that animation first takes place at. There it is. Drag that keyframe, then find the next part, which is right here, and zoom in. And that'll enlarge that sparkle to something like that. Now we're still not done, because if I progress this forward, watch what happens here. Alright, you see how that's sitting kind of off to the right there? I don't want it in that spot. I want this a little more to the left. So all I have to do here is click in the preview box in the pantocrop, use the right arrow key to reposition it. Sorry about that, that's pretty good. Then I'm going to take and highlight all the keyframes, right click on one of them, and then click smooth, so we can get a smooth animation. Now to play it back, and yeah, it's a little laggy, but there you go. That's how it looks the first time. Let's look at it one more time. Alright, that's exactly how I animate to my intro. So that's how you take and utilize the sparkle effects of this program. You just need to remember that when you take and get ready to use a sparkle effect, that the video track that you're dragging to is set to screen. And of course it would help if you also had it set up like how I've got it, with the first video track containing all the sparkles, and then having like your text and your image and all that below it. Alright, gonna take and fix this up a bit so we can move on to the next part. Which is the fade offset, indicated by these curving lines here. This is your basic way of creating fading effects on your media. and you see it very commonly with the dialogue that I have in each episode. So what I can do here, for example, is demonstrate how to do those fade effects on this first picture. You'll know when you're about to do it because you'll see this quarter circle symbol appear. Gradually dragging this all the way back to the left will shorten the fade in to the point where it completely disappears, which you guys can see for yourself in the preview window. Pulling this more toward the center will allow you to see that fade in take place. Same goes for the fade out, but backwards. More left to the center increases the length of the fade out effect, and more right will decrease it. Right click on either of them, and then mousing over fade types will show you a list of different ones that you can choose from. There's not that much difference in these here, so I just typically stick with the fourth one, aka your default. While I'm on the subject as such, I think I'll take a bit of time to go over the type of fade that you guys see often during the narrative parts of my episodes. Okay, so I have these two screenshots of Ash and Dawn during this first part of my episode, and you'll notice that there's an X-like symbol here. That X is actually representing what I like to call crossfading, and it's real easy to do. Take one edge of either media clip, and in this case I'm going to pull this one and drag it into the other clip. And that's all there is to it. And you can see for yourself how it'll look once you do that. Playing this back, now you see how that screenshot of Ash sort of fades into Dawn all of a sudden. Of course, you also have the same option of right-clicking on it to select the different types. And there's 25 of them this time as opposed to the 5 that you saw previously. Nothing to it, people. Nothing to it at all. Next to cover in the intro is the second part. How to make the text start out backwards like what you see here, and then flip over and move to the center. Now I can actually take and explain more about track motion like I promised earlier. So first off, make sure that the composite mode is set to 3D Source Alpha, not just Source Alpha, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to do the same kind of effect like what I'm about to show off. When I click on the button that opens up the track motion window, you're going to see these 3 keyframes. You're probably wondering why the first one has nothing changed on it. That's because this is necessary to have. With this keyframe, it prevents any editing that you do on the next keyframe done to whatever you previously worked on in the same video track. Here's what I mean. Okay, I've got the name of the series looking like this, correct? Now what if I took away this keyframe? See what happened to my text now? That's because this program is thinking that it needs to progress forward with making gradual changes to my text that comes before the keyframe that has the edit done on it. So what's needed here is that default keyframe to stop that from happening. So yeah, the second keyframe here is where the text is technically edited. Thanks to the 3D Source Alpha option, I can go in the rotation properties and flip the text over. And you do that by changing the Y value here to -180. What I did next was skip out a few seconds here, just clicked on Add Keyframe, set the text to restore itself back to normal without having to input any value in Y again. Since actual movement was involved as well, this means I had to make use of the event panic crop. So let me click on that. And for the first keyframe, I simply enlarged the preview box and then moved the center to this spot. Then I skipped out to 3 seconds and restored it. And that way, while the text flips over to the right after starting out on the left, it'll reposition itself to the center again while sizing back down. And again, select both keyframes and right click and then smooth. Set the text smoothly moves the way that I want it to. A little tricky, yes, but with enough practice, you'll get the hang of using the combination of track motion and the event pan crop. And if you manage to do that, then good for you. You just learned how to do advanced text motion. Third thing to cover regards how I animated the text when introducing Ash and Dawn. The entire thing's done solely through the event pan and crop. Opening this up, you'll see 4 keyframes in use. For the first one, I moved the box up into the far right so that the text is off screen on the left. In the second one, the box got moved to the left just barely above the center here. Now that third keyframe that you see is actually the exact same thing as this one, and all that I'd done to do that was by right clicking on the second keyframe, copied it, and then pasted it over here. By doing it this way, the text will stay put long enough for people to read it before it eventually slides off to the right, as I had done so in the fourth keyframe by moving the box toward the opposite end. Without the second and third keyframes done the way that I did them, the text would just continuously move to the right instead of briefly stopping in the middle for a few seconds. No need to go over the bit of text that introduces Dawn, since the same edit was done for both things of text media. One thing to add here is that for the video clips, these are actually at a somewhat slower speed, and is no different than what I showed you guys about how to speed up or slow down your audio clips. Video clips are done in that same method. You know, you just hold down the control button and then you left click hold on one of the edges and drag it either to the left or right. Except in this case, when you do such edits, you'll see the zigzag looking line here, letting you know that you're changing the speed of the video. You don't see it with Dawn due to the fact that I had to separately render that video clip, since that scene only lasted for like 2 or 3 seconds at normal speed. Now we get to the point where I can start talking about how to use transitions with your media. These two here have the dissolve effect on them, which is like a color fade kind of transition. To do that, you click here, and then go into dissolve. The two that's being used here is the fade to white. When the window pops up, these options should look very familiar to you by now. You've got yet another drop-down menu to select the different types of dissolves that's available, but the only one that you'll likely be using is the fade to color one. Just like the fade offset, you can shorten or lengthen how long this particular fade lasts, and also select fade types by right-clicking. I've got these two stretched out long enough that the fade disappears right after the text comes into view, creating a neat little way to show off the last bit of my intro. And yes, I will explain that sparkly looking effect you guys see in the episode titles, but I'm saving that part for when I go over the credits section, because I can do a better demonstration of that there than here. Jumping into the credits section, I'll start off by talking about the way that I animated the title. This makes use of track motion once again, only this time I've done this a bit different. If you look here in the preview window, notice that it starts out upside down, and then it eventually flips over and moves to the upper left, while having a slight downward tilt to it. The steps taken were almost similar to how I'd done that one part of my intro. So to invent pen and crop, I had enlarged the box and moved it down, so that the text starts where I've got it at. Then I shrunk it and moved it a bit to the right. Going into the beginning here in the track motion, instead of changing Y's value, I changed X's instead, and made it -180, hence why the text looked the way that it did at the start. Then in this keyframe, I made a slight change to the Z value in the orientation property, which was originally at -6. Adjusting this will tilt the text in a positive or negative slope. The more negative the value, the more positively tilted the text is, and more positive equates to it being more negatively tilted. You can also go to the very end of either side of the slider here to do full 360-degree rotations, but going to those ends will only make the text look the same as it did if you had set the value to 0. Highlighting all of the keyframes and picking smooth, I was able to pull off this kind of animation. And once more, I included that one keyframe over here so that none of my text behind the credits section changes. What I'm about to show off next is a pretty neat thing that you can do. Have you ever wanted to create blurred motion with text? Well, this is how you go about doing that. So if I play this part of the credits section, you'll see that the text slides from the right, stops, and then goes back. In order to achieve this effect with your text, you'll want to go into the event pan and crop. And I'm just going to use the text that's underneath the subtitles for this demonstration. All you have to do is either left click hold on the box and move it this way, or just use the left arrow key to set the box to this position. Then you'll want to move this to the right just far enough that the text stops here. Copy and paste that keyframe for however long you want the pause to last. And again, similar to what I showed in that one part of my intro involving text sliding. And you can just copy the first keyframe and paste it at the very end. That takes care of the motion, but we still need to give it that blurred look as the text comes in and retreats later on. So this means that I get to make use of a video effect. The effect that was in use was this one. And I'm just going to call this the G-blur because I honestly don't know what the correct pronunciation for it is. I seriously don't. But anyway, when you select this, you'll have these options to work with. Very basic stuff, whether you're changing the horizontal or vertical range of your blur, and then you've got these channels here, which just controls the color. Now let's take it and go through the process that was involved in making use of this effect. And this is applied to every subtitle and the text below each one, so I only have to show this one time. Starting here, I brought out the horizontal range to 0.190, and then for only about 0.07 seconds later, I decreased that value down to 0.064. It kept doing so until I brought it to 0 for the 5th keyframe. However, this only covers the first part. We need to do the blur effect again for when the text starts to move out. So I skipped all the way over here and just did the opposite in this case, starting at 0 for the first one and then increasing the blur from there using the same values. Highlighted all the keyframes so I can do yet another smooth animation, and that's all there is to it. Just like in some movies that shows the credits of the cast of the people who made the film, you can do that same effect with Vegas Row 10. Before I go over to the next part, I just want to say right quick that for the first screenshot of Ash and Pikachu there, it had made use of another transition, which is the 3D fly in and out effect. No editing of the transition's properties was done. I just dragged it into a timeline and then extended its duration. Thought I'd point that out in case anyone was wondering. With that knocked out of the way, now I can explain how I made the text of the name of this episode all sparkle-like. This utilizes one of the video effects again, this time the Glint Effect. You can do this by either going into the Video Effects tab, selecting Glint, and then drag the effect into the text media. Or click on this third icon here below the Event Pan and Crop one, which opens up a window that lists all of the video effects available, and then choosing Sony Glint. Click Add, and then OK. Doing so will pull up this window. 11 options will appear for the first tab, where your main Glint edits will be. You do have this mask effect here, but I've never used it, so I'm not sure what you're able to do with it. But moving on, you have options to either increase or decrease the threshold, which controls how much the glint effect you see, lower value for more visibility, and higher for less. You can boost the look of your glint if you want to with this one. The horizontal and vertical radius controls the length of your streak or streaks if you have it set to more than one, which I can show you right quick. So if I click here and drop this down to 1, then I can use the vertical radius to control it, but because it looks like this, filling with the horizontal radius isn't going to do anything until I add another streak. That's about as basic an explanation as I can give for that part. Hue and Hue Suite controls the color of the glint, including the direction and extent of the color. So if you wanted something like a blue hue for the glint, then you drag the slider to this spot, and then using the Hue Suite, you can see how that blue hue grows and shrinks. We already know about saturation and streak, so I can skip those. Orientation controls how the streak or streaks are positioned, and I'll explain that once I start talking about how I made use of this glint effect here. For these last two, you can reduce the flicker if you see a lot of it going on with the effect occurring. And effect only will take away the text, so you will only see the effect itself. To let you all know how I done this, I started out with this kind of setup. Then for the next 4 keyframes, I did a gradual increase in the orientation so the streaks would rotate properly. When I got to the 5th keyframe, I took away 1 streak and began to increase the threshold while still going forward with the orientation. And this continued until the very end where the threshold was at 100%. Meaning that you can no longer see the glint by that point. Sounds like a lot to take in, doesn't it? Well, trust me, it is. It's tedious work for sure, but definitely worth all the time spent to make a really good glint effect. Let me just take and fix this up a bit right quick. Last thing to tackle here is the way that I did this bit of text. It's nothing that I haven't already explained because it's essentially the same as when I talked about how I flipped that bit of text way back in the intro, and again when I started talking about how I made my credits section. Now here's where we introduce yet another video effect. This time it's the Sony glow effect, responsible for that white flash that you saw earlier. Aside from the usual color options, you have the glow percent, which controls the appearance of the glow, higher for a softer and less visible look, and lower for a more solid and visible look. Intensity pretty much just makes the glow significantly brighter if you want to make it that way. And then suppression is similar to the glint effect's threshold property in that it determines how much visibility there is of the glow. Four easy steps here are taken to pull this off. In the first keyframe, I drag this out to full suppression so that the text is clearly visible for a split moment before the second keyframe, which I then nearly completely took away the suppression, allowing the glow effect to kick in, and last for the 4 seconds that it did before finally clicking on the add keyframe button to return it to normal, and then performing the smooth animation for all 3 keyframes. And what you end up with is a very nice animation of the text flipping around while growing larger, and then doing the glow, or flash effect as I like to call it, before it slowly disappears. Love how I add that heart sparkle with this picture here. Sort of gives it that cutesy look to it. All I did was move it over to the spot that it's on, and then zoomed in on it just enough that it fits around them perfectly. You know, to the event pattern crop and all that. So that's how I did this part of the credit section. Now that we've got the intro and credit section done, I can move on to a few more things that I personally wanted to cover in this video before I wrap things up. Going back to this point of my Season 3 finale, I'm sure that a lot of you would love to know about the battle scene that takes place between Ash and Dawn and Team Rocket. Just want to point out that up here underneath the toolbar, there's this button called Auto Preview. It's a fantastic thing to have because this will actually show me the true quality of the video and will allow smooth playback, so there's no need to worry about any lagging during this recording here. With that enabled, all that I have to do is find the video and let it play while I talk. So, what I'm about to say may come as a bit of a surprise here, but all of the animation that you see going on there was not done through video clips at all. This whole scene was done by making use of several hundreds of screenshots. As a matter of fact, at least 450 screenshots were needed to make this. And this is the part that I was referring to before when I said that there was one part that took me 4 days to do. Well, this is it. I would pull up the project file that I had for this one scene, but it kinda got lost one day, so I no longer have it. You do see that there are moments where I used a still image, but I wanted to create this epically awesome battle, so I decided to give it the look of animation by using those screenshots in a certain order. I managed to do this by first getting the Japanese dubs of the Pokemon anime, and the reason for that is because I personally find that particular dub to have better screenshots to use without worrying about the stupid Cartoon Network logo thing that you usually see in the bottom right corner of the English dub. So I simply Googled the following. This site provides torrent downloads of both the TV and DVD rips. So you'll see a list of links that can take you to either the English or Japanese dub. And I'm going to choose this first link. So there it is, 720 HD quality of Season 13. Then you just click on this, which my browser will then prompt me to either open it through BitTorrent, the program that you can use to download the torrents with, or save the file. I usually just go ahead and open it in that program, which I already did to save more time here. Once that was done, and I allow the program to download whatever episode I wanted to use, I go into its window by right-clicking here and selecting Open Containing Folder, taking me through the folder pathway to my downloads, and then I can select the video to play. When I find the one that I want, this program opens up. And I've already took and chosen an episode. So this program is called Media Player Classic, yet another free download that you can find through Google searching. It's much easier and better to use than Windows Media Player in my opinion, since you have more features to work with. And two of those are the ever useful Next Frame button and Save Image, serving as your screenshooting option. Let's say I wanted to make use of this scene that I've already got here paused. This will usually represent the first screenshot. So I'm going to right click, File, and then Save Image, or Alt+I, and save my image, usually inside of a folder. Then click on this button to go to the next frame, and do the process all over again, and I would keep doing this until I got what I needed. You want to talk about something that's time consuming, this is the perfect example of that. After finally getting all this done, I ended up with the battle scene that took place. Possibly one of the greatest things I ever achieved with this program, and I feel proud for spending those extra 4 days to make this, because it seems like a lot of people loved the way that I did that scene altogether. So those 4 days that I spent working on it were not wasted. That's for sure. Alright, so with this part finished, I'm going to actually open up a separate project file for the next two things here. And both of them regard edits that I did for a couple of scenes involving Dawn. So let's get into that. One of those parts that I'm about to show comes from the scene when Dawn's gradually smiling after Ash presents the engagement ring to her. And this will take the most time, so I'm going to begin explaining about it first, and then I'll jump to this other part here of how I made Dawn look like she is about to cry. You see off to the far left that I've copied and pasted a part of the first scene that I'm going to show you guys from the Season 3 finale project file, just to make it easier to do in this recording. So this is what it looked like. Despite being only 10 seconds long, much was done to make that scene look the way that it did. And here's why. Moving over here, you see 4 individual screenshots, all of which have Dawn with slightly different looking expressions. I'm going to go into this with the first one, but I'll be introducing you guys to something new, and it's one of the most interesting things that exists with this program, which is masking. Now masking can be very fun or very annoying. For me it was kind of tough at first, but then I got enough practice and eventually I managed to pull off what I'm getting ready to show here. If you ever wonder about how people make those AMVs with a person that was obviously taken for one image and placed in another, or they took like a person that was moving around in some video clip and they managed to put them inside of another video, those two things right there are prime examples of masking. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do is go here, and then underneath position is where the masking option is located. Click on that box and it'll be enabled. The purpose of this feature is so that you are able to take a part of an image to where it is the only part that remains out of the whole thing. Left of your workspace here are the tools that you can use, such as the anchor creation tool, which will be what you'll mainly be using, the anchor deletion tool for removing the anchor paths that you make, the zoom tool, all of that. To get this going, I'm going to enable the anchor creation tool and start clicking. Each yellow square is an anchor and represents a point along a path in which the anchored image will be left alone, while the rest of the image will disappear. So I'm just clicking along Dawn's outline here, trying to be as perfect as I can, because the more anchors that you make, the better the mask will turn out. So you just need to try to be as perfect as you can. If you ever find yourself screwing up, instead of deleting the whole path with the anchor deletion tool, just do either Ctrl Z on your keyboard or click undo. Just gotta take your time. No need to rush. All that I need to do is just click on that first square and it'll close this whole path off. And poof. Everything but Dawn disappears. Now to add in the background, I just take this image here and drag it underneath. And you see that instead of a black background behind her, the image is there. But I'm still not done. I need to be able to take and cut off the areas above and below Dawn. But that can easily be remedied by clicking on Save Snapshot to File. This is what will do your screenshooting. And you want to make sure that to set this to best full, because if you don't, the image won't come out in high quality. Clicking on this will open the window for pre-named file image 1. And it'll do this in numerical order. So the next one that you take will be image 2, then image 3, and onward. Once you're done taking a screenshot, Vegas Pro 10 will automatically import it for immediate use. But I'm going to go ahead and delete this though because I don't need it right now. With that saved image, I can go into this, Photoscape. Yet another free program that I use, and it does much more than your basic image editing. It's got some other things such as being able to combine your images into one picture, create an animated GIF, dividing your image, all those things there. But the only one that you'll really care for is the editor. You can take and explore the rest of this at your own leisure because this video is getting kind of long. It's already over an hour by this point, so I don't have too much time left. I'm going to go into the crop tab, where you'll find tons of ways to crop your images. Most of them are ratios, although I don't use those very much personally. Or crop freely, which is what I'm going for. You just left click hold and drag to create the box, and then adjust as needed. So now I'll just click crop. And now you see that the image is fixed. Just click save. And then what I can do is go back into the project file to import it. With the new image, we can put it in the timeline, and as you can tell, it looks better now. Since I've already got those same images back over here, I'm just going to skip to adding. Since I've already pretty much shown what needs to be shown here, I'm just going to explain what I did with these 4 images instead. So after I did the masking effect on each one of them, I just crossfade them, like so. And then in each of these images, I took and did a certain zoom for each one. So for the first one, I took and went to the very end and zoomed in just a little bit. And then what I would do is copy that keyframe and then go into the event pattern crop of the next image and paste that keyframe so that it becomes the first keyframe to be in use. And then I'll skip out to the end of this one and do the same thing. And I would keep doing this until I got what I wanted. And of course I made sure that the smooth animation was applied so that you can see it just sort of slowly moving to Don's face. And there you have it. Man, that was a lot to explain, but necessary nonetheless. I told you guys this would be long, didn't I? Oh boy. Well, there's not much left by this point, since this video is beginning to come to a close. For the second part, it'll be much shorter to explain. Using the solid color from the Media Generators tab, I can make Dawn look like as if tears are coming out of her eyes. Here's a finished look of that. Okay, so I'm going to take and grab the cyan color here from the solid color, and then drag that and the screenshot of Dawn to the timeline. Go ahead and get this set up right quick. Okay, create the zoom in on Dawn. With that done, now we get to add in a video effect for the solid color. Selecting the Sony cookie cutter. With this one, you can not only create the tear effect, but you can also do those dream and flashback like effects too. And I'll briefly go over that when I get done with this. So your options are the shape of the effect, anything from a circle to different arrowheads, the cut method, which you can either make it to where you remove the shape so you can see through it while you see the rest of the solid color that was chosen, or in cutaway section, remove the borders so that you'll only see the shape. Feather and border for softness level and the size of the color of the border that you want to have. Repeat X and Y can make it to where you have more than one shape along an X or Y coordinate. Size is pretty obvious what it does. Then you have your usual color selection. And this one here to move your shape in any direction that you choose. As far as how I did it, I set this to oval side and let the cut method just cut away all the section. Boosted the feather all the way up and drag the border to 0.21. In Repeat X, I only added one repeat in order to get the tears that I want, and reduce the size to 0.050. You see by this point that I have these black circles here. To get rid of those, I can either click through and see which shade of blue best matches the cyan color, or go into the generated media part of the solid color and look at the RGB values, so I can just take and input those same values over here, which is the more preferable thing to do in my opinion. That's fixed now, which means I only need to move these circles here to line them up with the bottom of Don's eyes. Good. Now the very last thing involves messing around with the event panic crop. So I'll click here, disable both of these options, and bring that first keyframe up to here, since that's where the fading effect ends. Then taking the right side of this box, I'm going to keep dragging it to the left until I get exactly what I want. That looks about correct right there. The result should be this when it's all done. So you see zoom in, when the tears come up. Perfect. That's exactly how it should look if done correctly. Speaking of the cookie cutter and solid color media, I want to point out two more things about them back in my main project file. When I worked on the wedding scene, I wanted to do a different tear look with Delia, so instead of setting this to oval side, I just kept it as oval. Changed the size of the center X value a bit toward the end so the tears would get a bit larger, and then did a simple reposition edit in here. But I needed to do what I did before with Dawn's tears in the event panic crop, so I can properly adjust the size. So you just go in here, disable both of these options, and then you adjust the box here on either side so you get what you want. The other thing can be found all the way out to the very last scene, where I decided to do this blush effect on Dawn, which requires solid color again, except this time in the cookie cutter effect, I had no need to change the repeat X option since I only need one shape. Within the 4 keyframes, I increased the size accordingly so that as the zoom in took place on Dawn, the blush would stay on her face like it's supposed to, creating what you see now. one more use of the cookie cutter effect was done here too. Here we have a scene where Ash thinks back to when he was wondering about how to word his proposal to Dawn. So aside from adding the black and white effect, which you only need to drag this to the amount that you want to add, I've done the following. Shape was set to oval, fully set both the feather and the border options, no changes to repeat X and Y, and made the color white. Don't have to worry about solid color this time, because the cookie cutter's color will already take care of that for you. For the keyframes that you see below, I alternated the size between 0.480 and 0.460 to make the oval animate, and then wrap things up by giving it a smooth look. When done correctly, you have yourself a flashback / dreamlike look. Well folks, surprisingly, I happen to have just enough time to show you guys how I made that desktop background. So give me one moment and I'll open up its project file for you. So here it is, everyone, the other project file that I mentioned about during the beginning of this video. So for the first 4 video tracks, which all have their composite modes set as source alpha, I used those heart images for each one and applied the masking effect before repositioning them in different spots. The 5th video track contained a heart sparkle, with again the composite mode set to screen for it to show up properly, and zoomed in just enough to make the heart fit the way that it does over Ash and Dawn. My 6th and 7th video tracks contained the text for the top and bottom, with a few edits done in the text properties tab. You guys know about that already. Both of their modes also set as source alpha. And finally, the 8th video track has the fan art, with its mode set to source alpha. When all of that was finished, I selected the very middle of all my media here, changed the preview quality to best full, took a screenshot, saved the file, and then set the image as my background. Very easy to do, and it only took me 15 minutes tops. Well, that is it for this video, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit here and watch this video. If I seem to have forgotten about something, and I'm pretty sure that I might have, I'm pretty sure I did, or you guys wanted to know anything else regarding the program or my series, comment below or message me. Before I close this off, just want to say one last thing. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to make my story, and I've had a lot of fun with it. With all the positive criticism that I've received, it was that very thing that kept me going, and I'm so glad to have finally made a completed PLS series here on YouTube. In fact, I happen to know certain people out there that love it so much that they would like for me to put it up over on fanfiction.net, which I do have an account with that site, but I haven't put up anything yet. I've decided that I could do this epic rewrite of my story that involves much more detail and everything, since I'm not having to worry about video length, music, pictures, or anything like that. I can expand my imagination and really show you guys what I can do with my writing skills. If I get enough votes toward doing something like that, then I'll do it. So do let me know about that as well, folks. Anyway, that wraps things up for this video here. Thanks again for watching. This is Killer Chaos 7, signing out. Take care, everyone.